Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ergo Prism Channel. Today, I have a very special guest with us. This is Reuben Yap. He is a co-founder of Firo. Welcome, Reuben.
Hello, thanks for having me. Yes.
So, Ergo and Firo share more than a few things in common. They're both proof-of-work cryptocurrencies. You can mine them with GPUs. They are ASIC resistant. And first and foremost, Reuben, what is Firo? And as the co-founder of the project, what role do you play in the development of Firo?
So Firo actually started in 2016 as a privacy cryptocurrency, and it was actually originally called Zcoin. And we were, I think, we were the first ones that actually deployed a protocol called Zero Coin, which is different than what Zcash uses, which is the Zero Cash protocol. And technically, I'm not really a co-founder because I came in 1 month after. But because I've been, I guess, such a big part of the project since then, that they just say, yeah, just use the title. It's a lot easier rather than trying to explain what I do. I don't actually come from a development background. I used to be a lawyer for 10 years and just kind of grew into this role. So I am part of the core team. I coordinate all the developers and researchers and basically, just set the direction and strategy for the overall project. Yeah.
Interesting. And
interesting.
No, it is interesting. Okay. One of the most important focuses for Firo, not Firo, Firo appears to be privacy. You guys are very privacy centric. It's one of the one of the most unique value propositions that a cryptocurrency really can offer in this space, and it isn't highlighted as much as it should be. So what did your team feel privacy in particular was important to tackle with the creation of Zcoin and now Firo?
So there's two ways to answer this. I mean, obviously, let me answer this like very honestly, right? Because Horman, who was one of the people, he's a Thai developer who actually started the project, and he actually he was doing his master's at Johns Hopkins University under Matthew Green. And Matthew Green is one of the founding scientists of Zcash, and also came out with the Zero Coin and the Zero Cash protocols. And when he saw this, it was not so much for him. It was not so much of like, oh my God, we need privacy. It was more of like, this is like crazy cool, and this is like making coins disappear and then reappear, and then like, your brand new history. And back then in like, when he came across it in like 2014 or so, the cryptocurrency was like really in its nascent stage. Like all the altcoins that you had were basically stuff that had a faster block time, a different mining algorithm. It were all kind of like forks of Bitcoin with several different flavors. They weren't that different, right? And they were like, wow, this is something actually really cool that can be implemented into a cryptocurrency. And he decided to do that. So I hope I'm not speaking on behalf of him, but when I was talking to him, it was more like I really wanted to get this implemented. Obviously, why I got into the project is slightly different because I actually started a VPN service back in 2007, and it's a privacy service, right? And it was kind of a different because back then, my government was actually like censoring a lot of stuff. First it was kind of like non-controversial, especially from Malaysia, where we are Muslim state, saying like, okay, we're gonna block the pornography. Okay, fine. We're gonna then next thing they said, let's block the P2P because it's all pirated material. So like, okay, that kind of sucks. And then after that it started creeping on to become like, let's block opposition sites or stuff that publishes stuff that goes against the government. So I saw the censorship creep, right? And VPNs back then were, basically a way to kind of like, just make traffic neutral so that they can't really block all this traffic, at least back then, right? Because I could access all this stuff. I wanted to read like opposition stuff. I wanted to access my anime. I could do that, right? And I started this VPN service in 2007 and it was 100% legal. There's nothing illegal about running a VPN. It's so commonplace right now. But back then, we were classified in the same category as, pornography or gambling. We were considered high risk. Nowadays it's like, buy your antivirus, get the VPN, or get a browser and it comes with a VPN. It's so normal. But back then it was like, why are you trying to hide your internet traffic or prevent people? Because if you're doing that, you must be doing something wrong. Kind of like the same argument right now, right? Like saying that, why are you using a privacy coin? Because you must be doing something illegal. Similarly, even when Bitcoin first started, why would you use Bitcoin unless you're buying drugs on Silk Road? Obviously, this is all rubbish, right? But this is how the narrative kind of started, right? And, after all of that, then I started getting wind of like, wow, like my government is kind of like overstepping its boundaries. It actually started doing mass surveillance on regular users already. Maybe they actually like partnered up with a hacking company to spy on their own citizens, right? So, and I was like, look, I was providing privacy for my VPN services, and people were asking, well, if I have to pay in PayPal, if I had to pay in fiat, if I have to pay in some other like wire transfer or something like this isn't a really, a private way to use your service. And someone told me about Bitcoin, and back then people thought Bitcoin was reasonably private. Obviously now we know better, right? And I was like, yep, let's go into Bitcoin. I found out it wasn't private. I started going into privacy coins, and then it was Darkcoin and Monero. I think these were the only two ones, and Darkcoin is now known as Dash. And then this thing came out, Zcoin, new way of privacy. It was not about coin mixing. It was like this new, it was, I think, one of the first protocols to use zero knowledge proofs. And I was like, this is mind blowing. I really wanted to give it a go because I value privacy a lot. And if this offered like a great degree of privacy, obviously I want to get involved in this. So yeah, that's kind of how this started. And now I'm like, deep into the whole privacy thing. And obviously now I believe that, yes, especially with what's going on in the world today and the way that we have seen money being weaponized, like, we see what happened in Canada with the truckers, right? Getting their access to funds being cut off, right? Or what happened in China, right? Like people say, oh, the social credit score and all this, like, digital yen is like, all like boogeyman stuff. The China doesn't really affect things. Let me kind of like recount to you, like there's this one guy, his name is Zhu Xiaodong. He's an MMA fighter-ish, right? And he's a bit of an ass. And
he beat a bunch of people up, right?
yes. Basically, he went around challenging all these traditional Tai Chi masters, Kung Fu masters, and beat them up, right? And yeah, okay, that's fine. This is in a match, everything's not like just randomly beat them up. And then I think one of them didn't really want to fight with him. He started like, trying to goad him and said certain like bad things about Tai Chi and this guy. And that guy reported it to the authorities. And as a result, his social credit score was affected and he was cut off from parts of the financial system. Like he couldn't travel, he couldn't take a loan, because then you realize that, oh my God, right? If a government can cut off and control or censor money, it's no longer a public utility. It becomes a form of control because I can regulate your actions by saying what you can or cannot spend on, right? And it's a slippery slope. People don't see that, but with the advent of central bank digital currencies, everyone's talking about CBDCs. This is really like a dystopia, right? Like if let's say I have an authoritarian government, I can never replace them, because the moment I try to challenge them, bam, we get cut off from our finances. And maybe people in well-developed countries might think, well, it doesn't apply to me. Well, look at Canada, that happened to them, right? Or even in my country right now, we don't have a CBDC, but if there's an opposition party, what usually happens is the anti-corruption agency is then suddenly used to investigate all these people, right? Obviously people say, oh, it's not politically motivated, they're just doing their job, but it is obviously can be used as a weapon, right? So I really feel that money should be a public utility. It should not be a method of control. And obviously cryptocurrency was to be this alternative financial system, right? And it was supposed to be an answer to all this crap that like the government can print as much money as they want. They can choose who that it benefits, and right. And unfortunately, today we've been seeing that most of the top cryptocurrencies are stable coins, right? And we just saw Terra, Luna, and like everything's trying to mimic US dollars. And I was like, why are we actually doing this? Why are we in cryptocurrencies? Why are we emulating the systems that we were trying to break free from, right? Let's print as much money to hold the pack. That's basically how a lot of these algorithmic stablecoins work, right? So it's a oversimplification, and I think I might have gone off tangent with my answer, but it's a pet gripe, right? Like this was supposed to be hard money, reinventing this alternative finance, but it ends up that we start replicating what all the problems that we have in this world, just in a worse form, because it's now all digital and you can cut people off. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a very long answer.
Not actually not that long. If we're talking about the topic of privacy, I mean, that could be a 3-day conference of only that one topic. And no, that is a very good quality answer. And considering you have the experience with VPNs in the first place, I think you're looking ahead at the sort of slippery slope when we begin to push on people's individual rights, and we keep pushing it and we keep offering reasons, whether that be from the government or that feeling that if you're concealing something that you feel is private, therefore you must be hiding something, because what do you have to hide if you're not doing anything wrong? That type of logic is coming from the
you have nothing to fear if you have nothing to hide. And you know who said that? Do you know who said that?
No.
Joseph Goebbels, who was basically the Nazi propaganda chief. So because they determine what is right or wrong. And that is a very scary thing to me, especially in this weird world of misinformation and stuff like that, right? And like even in my country, like I'm not an anti-vaxxer, right? I understand some people are, right? But I am very against using this as an excuse to erode our privacy, right? Like suddenly, just for 2 years, I had to report all my movements to the government, because I had to check in and all of this and all, every time I go into a place, I have to check in, check out, check in, check out. I'm basically giving all my data to the government, right? And then we realize that, oh, actually the government doesn't really own this data. It's been outsourced. It actually owned by another company. And like, holy crap, all our personal data, all my movements for the past 2 years, that we trusted the government to look after, is all just like compromised, right? And now you're expecting people like, all right, sometimes, I think privacy allows us to be human, right? We all have skeletons in our closet. We all have mistakes that we have made, right? And sometimes we just don't want people to know, right? Like, yeah, okay, you know, I bought something on OnlyFans. Is it really that bad, right? But it's not something I want the world to know, right? Or let's say if I have erectile dysfunction, I want the whole world to know if I'm buying like some sort of prescription meds or I'm trying to have a baby or something like that, right? These are all really, really intimate parts of our life. And we know that, you know, certain things can be taken out of context to make you look really, really bad, you know, like, you know, for example, someone could just say like, oh, I'm just very curious about, you know, how does it look, you know, how easy is it to search for, you know, child exploitative material, and they might just say, oh yeah, child something, right? And then you know, it gets taken out of context and like, oh, this guy is searching for this sort of stuff, right? When actually he's like, no, he's not in that sort of category. But you can see how these things can be taken out of context, used against you, weaponized. And I feel that, of course, financial privacy is just one part, but it is one of the most important things, right? What we do with our money, how much we get, how much we receive. And let's think about even like, let's say on a very basic point of view, where if we expect cryptocurrencies to kind of, you know, take off as a mainstream usage, right? Just imagine if I was paying using Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatnot, and you say, hey, why don't you pay me, you know, for this item, or buy a coffee and whatnot? Or let's say if I pay with Ethereum for if the gas fees somehow made sense, right? I pay you, you can look up that address and suddenly you know, oh, this is how much you're worth. This is what you did. This is where you got your money, or this is all the other coins that you own. Why should I be giving this information just by the fact of paying you, right? When I receive money, all I need to know is, did I get paid, right? For many, many items, right? Most of the time when you pay cash, when you pay card, no one asks like, oh yeah, you know, like what were you doing with this, right? And I think this is the element that cryptocurrency is actually worse than traditional cash or fiat money. And
Yes.
it's a real problem. Who's going to, you know, I want to pay my employees, and then suddenly if I pay my employees, now everyone knows how much my employees are paid. That's not great either. Or my suppliers, who my suppliers are. So even if you have nothing to hide, there are things that we definitely need confidentiality or some sort of privacy, just because of the way the world works. And I really don't like the whole, you know, the characterization that privacy is for criminals, when the natural state of things before this digital world is private, right? Our thoughts are private. Everything is private. You want to come and look, you have to come to my place. But now with digital, you know, world, and we giving out that, this is now no longer the norm. You know, there's this whole generation of people who are not used to, you know, they don't even have the concept of privacy anymore. So yeah, I think maybe I should stop talking about this, but yeah, I wanted to get that off my chest. Yeah.
No, I thank you for your very thorough answer. Going back, two things that you mentioned. Do you think, well, number one, it seems that for example, you mentioned in your country, but in most countries, the framework that COVID has given governments to observe and to develop kind of the infrastructure of being able to check on people. Do you believe that ever goes away? Once the government lays a framework for something, there's so much money put into it. Do you think that really ever goes away? I don't believe, for example, in the US, we have a history of once we allow something to take place, we never put it back in the bag. You know, once we give up that section of autonomy for whatever reason, maybe it's for the greater good in that particular moment, or maybe it is controversial in that particular moment. But once it has come to a conclusion that we are doing this and it is here and it's only temporary, it never really is temporary because the framework has been set in place. Do you feel like, for example, you living in Malaysia or even in general across the globe that all these COVID implementations, regardless of how you feel about it or vaccination or whatever, do you feel that will be used in the future for other purposes that may not be so noble?
Yeah, I mean,
Allegedly.
I definitely believe that. My country has leaked all sort of things from even like tax records and national registrations. So I mean, luckily for us, because there was a scandal, because our data was, our health data was basically released to outside countries. So there was this big outroar, and as a result, they deactivated the check-in system, which is great. But I feel that if there was no like scandal uproar, it might have just continued or pervaded and stuff like that, right? But this is not just a problem with Malaysia, right? Like we have seen very manipulative legislations being passed in the US where they say, oh, this is for child protection, and therefore now all sites shouldn't have end-to-end encryption because they should be able to monitor what happens on their platform, because they cannot say that I'm not responsible for what happens in my platform. So they need to make sure that they can see everything so that they can censor stuff or like report and stuff like that, which basically kills end-to-end encryption, right? And like seriously, like to protect, yes, the excuse is correct. Like, yeah, okay, I'm using this to protect against like exploitative material on children. That's a noble cause. But is it really? Because you are basically getting like a backdoor into everyone's communications just to protect this thing, right? It's kind of like saying, like, this is like it needs to be proportionate, right? Whereby, oh yes, there is a risk of me falling down the bathroom and knocking my head and dying. Yeah, this is a risk. I would like to prevent this risk, but does this mean that I should have a surveillance camera in every bathroom to report when I've fallen down? Obviously, no one would agree with that, right? But this is similarly like to protect children. All our communications cannot be secure or private. It's open to all these companies that can read. This actually opens more problems than it actually solves.
So what you're saying in a way is that there's an infinite amount of things that we could try to protect, and there's an infinite amount of ways to erode privacy and other things that are
no.
integral to individual sovereignty.
What I'm saying is that there has to be balance. That yes, there are certain things we need to do to protect, right? Like, okay, anti-money laundering rules, that you're moving very, very large amounts of money, the bank can ask you, yeah, where is this money from? Okay, maybe that makes sense, right? Or like, or like, if you manage to track down certain offenders, yeah, but then does that mean that everyone else has to give up their privacy? It doesn't quite make sense, right? Like everybody now just has to surrender their data so that Big Brother can make sure that no one's doing crimes. This is a horrible way to look at things. So it has to be proportionate. Yes, they should. I'm not against law enforcement. I'm not against like catching the bad guys, but it shouldn't be at the expense. Because if you take a look at a lot of these laws, like even the Patriot Act and a lot of that, very few of these laws actually led to actual actionable stuff or convicting people and whatnot. It was just used for other things, right? So I feel that it has to be proportionate and it should be constrained. Like I think like Apple tried to actually install something into everyone's phone whereby if it detected that you had child exploitative material, it would report it automatically.
So, Reuben, number two, do you feel that with having so many different products in this digital age, it is inevitable that through subscription models and having things like smart cameras around in your home and Alexa and things like that, is it inevitable for your privacy to be eroded over time as you consent to having better and better technology that is by nature going to be more invasive of your own privacy? for example, heart rate monitors, Apple Watches, and a few of the other things I mentioned? Or is there another way to get around that that could be more ethical without companies data harvesting so much and just trying to get more information from you by offering a cheap product?
There are actually privacy preserving ways. I mean, obviously this is, beyond the scope of like cryptocurrencies and stuff like that. But, stuff like Apple, even Google, they have been finding ways whereby the data, they are AI chips that are inside our, so that the data is actually processed within our phones and not necessarily sent out. So like the smart products can learn, but it is on your own database in your computer that isn't sent out. So I think that, there are privacy preserving ways to do this, and, there are technologies to enable this. I mean, even though you might say, oh, Google, has, one of the biggest breaches of our privacy, they do actually have the technology to even anonymize or like strip out certain metadata so that only a minimal stuff goes out. So I think there is a happy medium, right? It's just a matter of whether, more importantly, rather than companies care, is that whether consumers care. And when you say it's about consent, it's not really consent, right? Like you're telling me like, oh yeah, I don't consent, so I don't use the product, but everyone else is on it. It's not really consent. We're kind of being forced to do it, right? Like, yeah, I'm not a big fan of Facebook, but if I don't have Facebook, then I can't stay in touch with my friends. I can't do this and that, right? But doesn't mean I agree with what they do, but I have to use it. So I just have to choose what I share with the app, right? But I do think there is an increasing awareness of this, and people are starting to demand privacy. I mean, even Apple, started with their privacy advertisements, and people are starting to talk about it in the more mainstream space. So there is some hope that especially when it relates to data privacy, communication privacy, our photos, our cloud storage and stuff like that. That privacy has taken a huge step forward. People are a lot more aware. But when it comes to financial privacy, or especially cryptocurrency privacy, people haven't gotten there yet, because it isn't a real problem yet, because right now cryptocurrencies are like kind of speculative, right? So people don't see the issue yet. Because
So do you feel that if Bitcoin had superior privacy built into it from the beginning, we would have an entirely different outlook on the DeFi landscape right now?
Well, I mean, Bitcoin doesn't really do DeFi as it is, right? It depends how you define DeFi, right? But Bitcoin, if you want to say, privacy actually usually comes with some trade-offs, right? When you start using stuff like zero knowledge proof, advanced mathematics and stuff, there is some overhead. There's going to be some sacrifice in scalability. There's going to be some sacrifice in performance and things like that. Obviously, it's getting better all the time. But if you're saying like, if my focus is like, balls to the walls, like as fast as it can be, obviously I don't want privacy, right? Because it actually slows things down. Now there are also other kind of trade-offs, right? This is something what we call supply auditability, whereby can you actually know how much supply there is of the currency in play, right? So like for example, in privacy cryptocurrencies, we often hide the amounts, right? That means amounts are actually hidden. When I send you an amount on the blockchain, like people can't see how much is being sent, which is really great for privacy and really important, right? Because values are really important, right? So if I see a $1,000, $2,000 like being transferred, I can kind of make like certain assumptions about it, right? But if I hide that, it actually means that if I somehow manage to break the cryptography or find a weakness or flaw in it, I can maybe be sending infinity coins or creating coins out of thin air, right? So obviously that's the problem with privacy. Once you start the higher amounts, you can have inflation problems if the cryptography breaks, if there's an implementation bug. And we have to realize this is not uncommon. Bitcoin had two inflation bugs. It had one in I can't remember the exact date, but it was like, I think 1 trillion Bitcoins were generated due to a buffer overflow. I think it was a value overflow incident. You can Google it. It's there, right? 1 trillion coins were created. People saw it, and then they did some sort of soft fork to fix it, right? And as close as recent as 2018, there was actually another flaw that could have arose whereby someone could have created like a very large amount. It's like basically you could have an inflation bug, but it would have been detectable, right? And this was actually found by a Bitcoin Cash developer who disclosed it to the Bitcoin Core team, and that was also fixed. And people don't realize that, this was a live bug for not just like a short period of time, it was over a long period of time. Now, does that mean to say, we should not ever sacrifice supply auditability? And I mean, this is a whole talk on itself, because people are saying that, we can never sacrifice supply auditability. But look, with Bitcoin, right? Let's say I managed to find this inflation bug, and I managed to generate 10 million coins out of thin air, right? I start depositing into exchanges, I start selling, and I start withdrawing here and there and whatnot. What's going to happen, right? Are you saying, let's roll back the chain? You can't, because there are already other counterparties that have taken that money and all of that. You can't just roll back those transactions, right? So most likely, what do you have to do? You have to accept it. So maybe if it was an inflation bug of 100,000, 200,000 coins, people were, yeah, that's fine. But what if it was, 100 million? 1 billion coins, right? And suddenly I just start standing the exchanges, and some didn't freeze in time and all that. It's going to create total havoc and basically destroy the whole value of Bitcoin, regardless of whether I can see it or not. I can see it, but I can't do anything about it. So it's a very nuanced argument. Obviously, it's a trade-off, but supply auditability and privacy, they're kind of at odds with each other. But if the cryptography works, if the code actually implements the cryptography without any bugs, then you don't have to worry about inflation bugs, unless there's a cryptographic assumption break, which can happen with the advent of quantum computers or stuff like that. But really, that's just going down a different rabbit hole.
Are there any other flaws or issues that you feel may put Bitcoin's long-term viability in jeopardy? And can you elaborate on the limitations of Bitcoin's technology?
Bitcoin's limitations are not so much technical. I think it's more of a culture, right? I mean, ironically, it's also a strength and also a weakness, right? Bitcoin's unchanging nature means that it is not easily modified. That's a value in itself, right? Because if it's hard to modify, not like with Ethereum or some other thing where I can just change the tokenomics here and there, right? And maybe that's fine, but Bitcoin is trying to be this money that, things should not be easy to change, right? But it also means that they're very, very slow to adopt certain things, and maybe that's okay, right? I mean, seriously, in this day and age, does a 10-minute block time really make sense? Things, even small things, or 1 megabyte block size, it was initially introduced by Satoshi as a temporary DOS protection measure, right? But back then, internet wasn't so great. But you're telling me now that our computers or our internet connections cannot take more than 1 megabyte every 10 minutes. Just this videos, I don't know how many 100 megabytes has passed, right? Yeah. So that also has been a crutch. But I think you're probably alluding to this one tweet I made in relation to the sustainability of of Bitcoin once the miner rewards kind of almost go to zero, right?
Yeah, and I'm in that boat as well. If you really look at the chart, it is very, very hard to see unless you issue multiple soft forks and change the transaction fees in such a way on chain, when Lightning looks like it's just going to keep increasing in the amount of volume it takes off chain, right? And it, I don't want to get into the specifics, but I see a lot of problems in the long-term viability when the miner rewards are going to be so minuscule in the future. But then again, there is this culture where anything that you highlight that could be a potential problem in the Bitcoin community is almost religiously just thrown under the rug, and what shitcoin do you represent, and this and that, and we are not actually having discussions on what would need to be done for the pioneer of the actual space itself.
Yeah, it's a lot to do with this kind of worship of like an infallible figure, right? Oh, Satoshi got it right, and therefore like he's like beyond human. Look, Satoshi may be a human or group of humans, right? Or an alien or that fat or whatnot. But that doesn't mean he's infallible, right? Like, yeah, he was a really smart guy, right? But his code was actually quite bad. I mean, like, you ask any coders, he the code wasn't that great, right? It didn't look like someone that was formally trained in coding or stuff like that. And he had really revolutionary ideas, but we have to see as Bitcoin as version 1, right? And to kind of say that, oh, he must have thought about it, he must have got it right. It's almost like building this cult figure, right? Which is kind of ironic because, Satoshi probably disappeared to try to avoid this, but people are now imputing what Satoshi would have thought, or that his views would never change. That's kind of also ridiculous, right? Or, I mean, like, if there was no cult over Satoshi, why do we have Bitcoin SV, right? Like, it's ridiculous, right? So what Satoshi would have done and stuff like that, which is really, honestly, is irrelevant, right? What Satoshi would have done is not important. Is that, does it meet the needs that we that Bitcoin set out to do? Not like, oh, Bitcoin Satoshi set this 1 megabyte limit, we should never touch it or something like that, right? Obviously, the argument is more nuanced, right? And I do feel that people say that, oh yes, Lightning Network will Bitcoin's price will continue to go up, and it has, so far it's been doubling more than double every 4 years. So miners don't really feel the pinch, right? So even if the block reward is halving, as long as Bitcoin's price keeps on going up, they're like, yeah, I'll continue mining, and that's fine, right? But really, yes, we're talking about $1 million Bitcoin or whatnot. So maybe that protects us for the next 20 years or so. Maybe that's fine. But what if we don't? Right? I think it's a very, it's not that I don't believe in Bitcoin. I really believe in Bitcoin, right? But I have to be realistic that Bitcoin's price cannot forever go up. It doesn't make sense, right? Like it has to reach a saturation point where, yeah, it's just like another commodity. It's not going to see, we might see gains, but we're not going to be seeing like 1,000-time gains or stuff like that, or doubling every 4 years. What kind of asset does that, right? Why it can take off is because there were a lot of people not on it, right? And therefore, when it's starting to gain mainstream adoption and starting to be used, then yeah, obviously there's more demand for it, right? But there is a point, right? There are only so many people in the world. There's only so much money in the world. It cannot keep on going up. And the point is that if it doesn't go up, keep on going up, then you're going to have this minor problem, right? And because if miners are earning too little for the base pay and fees are not subsidizing them, right? Then it's going to be a real problem. People say it's Lightning Network. Well, Lightning Network also requires people to open channels for them. Open, close channels. That still requires an on-chain activity, right? Are you saying that now to open my first Lightning wallet channel, I need to spend $1,000, right? Like that becomes like a semi-permission system, right? So I feel that, I laid out facts. My trade was showing like the trend of transactions and stuff like that. And people say like, Reuben, you're shilling your shitcoin and whatnot. I'm like, dude, my Firo also suffers the same problem because we were based off the Bitcoin model, right? And I'm not shilling. I'm just saying that this is a problem that people should really talk about because, people were talking about Luna because Luna was this amazing thing as long as the price kept on going up. Well, if Bitcoin price doesn't keep on going up, then you're going to be having these problems, right? Maybe it never happens. Maybe like Bitcoin just keeps on going up. Who knows? But it'll be unlike any asset class that we've ever known, right? So it'll be interesting to see. I just wish that people were having more, I guess, intellectual rigor and honesty rather than just repeating things. And you can just see from the replies, some of them are just like totally brain dead responses, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot we could talk about there with Bitcoin's limitations, but we're here to talk about Firo and proof of work and what we're doing here. So why did Firo, interestingly enough, you guys began in 2016, correct? Under Zcoin.
Yes.
Why did you opt for proof of work when so many projects are, at least now, proof of stake, majority proof of stake? Why did you choose that?
Now, this is a very interesting point. It's going to be quite controversial because I know Ergo is supports proof of work. It's one of the more profitable coins to mine in the GPU space, along with of course you have Ethereum, then you have Flux, you have Ergo, you have us, you have Beam. You have this like stable of Raven coin, right? Like all this proof of work mineable coins, right? And when one of the beauties of proof of work was, especially back then when exchanges weren't so liquid, it was a way to get into the project without having to put down a lot of money up front, right? I could be just like, hey, I'm interested in this coin, I want to get some of it, let me just dedicate some of my existing hardware, or maybe it's just a hobby, right? I get some coins and suddenly I've been onboarded onto the cryptocurrency. It's permissionless, right? It's kind of amazing in that way. While with proof of stake, you can't, because you need to get a certain amount to even begin to stake, right? While with proof of work, I could just be mining and bam. And that kind of made sense last time, right? Where mostly it was hobbyist miners. There was maybe a few industrial scale miners, but it was more like when I started in 2013 or so, when we mined coins, it was really very community based, right? You mine the coins that you like, that you wanted to support and stuff like that. Now, especially as a privacy coin, right? Especially when we're getting banned from exchanges and all this sort of stuff, having a permissionless way to get such coins is really important, right? Obviously now, back then we didn't have really good DEX infrastructure. Only now in the past, maybe 1 or 2 years, we're starting to see good cross-chain decentralized exchanges. And look, I think it was only maybe in the past 3 or 4 years that DEXs really took off, right? Because beyond that, it was always Binance, Coinbase, and stuff like that. And even now, it's still the majority of it is still on centralized exchanges, right? So proof of work was this really great idea to kind of bootstrap your community with people that could join in. But now, I've started to shift my opinion, because proof of work has been one of the pillars of Firo or Zcoin. It was this idea of permissionless, and we always wanted to say make it commodity mining, like commodity hardware. That means not this ASIC, right? Because ASICs are kind of like centralized in nature. People can control the supply. Graphics cards and CPUs are a lot more accessible. Everyone can get them. I can buy, like a country can ban an ASIC. They can't really ban GPUs or CPUs without handicapping their own country, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so we decided that proof of work is the way to go big on a distribution standpoint and community creation. But now this environment is no longer the case, right? Most of the miners, yes, obviously there are some hobbyist miners, but they are now like industrial scale GPU miners, ASIC miners, and stuff like that, and all they're out to do is they're going to mine the coin that is most profitable to them, right? And if you look at it, people miners like, oh, let's mine the coins that support us. That's totally bull, because if you take a look, what is the coin that has the most GPU hash rate on it? Ethereum. And Ethereum has completely abandoned miners, right? It's like they slash their fees, right? And then now they're going to proof of stake, right? And yet everyone's still mining Ethereum, right? It is obvious that people are just mining it to make money, not so much mining it to support the project that they like, right? And many projects like ourselves, like Firo, even Monero, and all these things, they always constantly suffer from one pool getting too large, and look, this is part of their responsibility as a miner to decentralize hash rate and stuff like that. But people don't care. They're just going like, let's see what's the pool that's going to give me the most consistent returns. I'm going to pick the biggest one. Bam, I mine. And it's like, they don't really think about the decentralization of their hash rate.
That was another question. No, go ahead, finish your thought, and then I'll ask.
No, you go ahead. It's fine. Yeah.
Oh no, I was gonna say that was another one of my questions. If you can elaborate a bit on 51% attacks, Firo has experience with that, and what incentives can proof of work cryptocurrencies provide miners to help avoid that in the future?
Obviously, for a smaller chain, it's gonna be always really hard. We actually did analysis on our 51% attack, and it wasn't like a simple. Let's get some hash rate from nice hash and attack you. Someone actually rented a GPU farm to attack us, and this was through quite good analysis that was done by Mitchell. I forgot his name. He's part of the Monero community, and he actually helped us to do the analysis. And he's like, this is most likely a rented GPU farm because this hash rate was not available anywhere else, right? So someone had the means and wanted to attack us, and they could. And for a smaller chain, right, it doesn't actually make sense to have all these miners securing it. If someone really wants to mess with us, they could. And it's kind of like a double-edged sword to be commodity hardware mined. Like GPUs, commodity hardware is a double-edged sword, because with ASICs, right? Let's say if I have a Bitcoin ASIC, if I 51% attack Bitcoin, my machines are now useless, right? Like, it doesn't make sense, right? Because my machine only mines Bitcoin. Why would I attack the thing that makes my machine valuable, right? While with graphics cards or CPUs, right, I attack something, that's fine. I have so many other coins to mine, right? Like I attack Firo, I attack Beam, I attack Grin and whatnot. It's fine, because the death of one or two cryptocurrencies or the attack still doesn't depreciate the value of my graphics card, because I can still game with it, I can still sell with it, I can still mine other stuff, right? And that's kind of like the double-edged sword of commodity hardware mining. But people say, oh yeah, well then let's just embrace ASICs. And I'm like, why would you want to do that? Because proof of work is about distribution. But if distribution is about, having a handful of manufacturers choose who they want to sell to, and that you have to have like some large scale stuff to mine it, then that's kind of like, well, only a few people are getting this supply, right? And Bitcoin had time to kind of like go through this distribution period where, like, you know, at 19 million coins or so, there's only an additional 2 million coins to mine. So yeah, you know, let the professionals do it. But there was this huge distribution period before where everyone was like, you know, mining it for fun, right? So I think it's different now. So I still like proof of work in the sense that, for several reasons, that is this continuous. You have to continuously put in work, right? It's not just like hold coins and a host of VPS, most likely in some AWS or DigitalOcean, and which leads to a different kind of centralization, right? But with mining, right? So even if the data centers go down or whatnot, as long as there are miners, you know, mining from their homes and stuff like that, the chain will continue to move on, right? And that's kind of beautiful from like a resiliency standpoint. And proof of work can always, like, you know, you can have your internet, like, you know, cut off from different things, and once they merge together, they can find a way to reach consensus. That's really good, right? So proof of work is great for that, but as a security mechanism, it really isn't that great, especially if you're GPU mineable and stuff like that, because you're always subject to 51% attacks, right? So how do you get past this, right? Are you going to say, are we going to expect miners to step up to defend the chain? I'm not sure how they can do that, right? If they see an attack happening, do they suddenly spin up all these spare GPUs that they have on the side? That doesn't quite make sense, right? Are they going to rent hash rate to defend? You know, how are they going to defend, especially in our case, right, where someone rented this GPU fund and just attacked us out of nowhere, right? So how do you address this? It's really hard. So I find it really tough that unless you are the dominant coin for your hardware class, everyone else is kind of like exposed to attacks. And I feel that I hope that we don't see it, but with the Ethereum going to proof of stake, some people are saying like, oh, this is great. You know, all these coins that are doing the proof of work, all these miners are going to switch and the value is going to go up. I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. Why would it go up if there are more miners on your platform, and most of them, a lot of them sell? Where are they going to? There's like, you know, how many million of miners on Ethereum? How can any of this currency support it, right? Are you saying that someone will pump the price up to support this you know, these GPU miners? Is not the same with Bitcoin, right? Where back then when mining pools would play such a mining pools and mining manufacturers played such a big role in Bitcoin, especially when the inflation was higher, right? Like you had Bitmain and all these people, and when they were about to release their new ASIC, you will notice that price would go up, because they also want to make sure that the price is high so that they can sell the machines, right? But there's no such incentives like that for GPU miners. There isn't, right? So you're saying that, well, okay, now we have this more mercenary class of miners, then they don't really do a good job in protecting your coin. They're just distributing it. You know, is proof of work really? A lot of the benefits of proof of work today have kind of been eroded, right? I'm not saying that it's totally useless, but it is not the same environment as it used to be, let's say, like even 5 years ago. So there are several ways to kind of protect against 51% attacks. Some are very crude. Like I know some chains, I wouldn't name them, but you know, they'll just say like, okay, we're going to have a max reorganization length of 6 blocks. That's it. You know, I don't care if you have a longer chain, as long as we are not going to accept any reorganization longer than 6 blocks. Okay, that's a kind of crude method, right? And there are other methods like ours, which combine a hybrid mechanism. Even Decred uses a hybrid mechanism, where there's kind of staking mechanism or some sort of other mechanism where the stakers kind of checkpoint each blocks. That means they see it, they lock it in. So that means that it's kind of like a hybrid consensus between proof of stake or like some sort of staking, because master nodes aren't actually a proof of stake, but it means that each block is being pointed by these validators, and then you have the benefits of some distribution with proof of work, with the kind of like block finality. Like there are no more reorganizations, right? Which from a user standpoint, from a security standpoint, makes a lot of sense. You get almost instant block finality, right? You're not worried, oh, is this block going to be reorganized or often or stuff like that, right? So I think it's good, right? Of course, then you could just chuck up proof of work completely and just move to a whole proof of stake system. And we'll see how Ethereum goes with that, right? I think it's interesting. But it would be kind of sad, I mean, we have seen this, rising ESG narrative that mining's bad for the environment and stuff like that. Obviously, as most things, the argument is nuanced. Like, yes, mining does consume electricity. Yes, some of it comes from bad, dirty sources, but it could also encourage renewables and all of that and all this sort of thing. So I probably wouldn't go into that, but what I'm saying is that I feel that proof of work is going to be slowly dying, unfortunately, and as a security mechanism for smaller chains, I think it's a horrible mechanism unless you have other ways to secure your chain against a 51% attack. Because, I remember there was this one, I think was it Green, they were saying that, yeah, proof of work, even if there's a reorganization of 5 or 6 days, this is working as intended. I mean, yes, that's correct, but that's horrible, right? Yeah. If you can roll back several days worth of blocks, that's a horrible security mechanism that I wouldn't want to do any sort of transactions of value on that chain. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, Firo is actually suffering from this problem right now. Like 80% of our hash rate is concentrated on a single pool, and we have tried to give incentives to switch hash rates, and we haven't seen them shift. We have seen like some people shift, but like they form less than 5% of the hash rate. That's like within the margin of error. Yeah.
What incentives have you tried providing them with?
So I'll say like, okay, because we have a developer reward, we tell the pool like, hey, we're going to give you this reward. You can distribute it to your miners so that you can up the rewards for that pool. So it makes it more attractive for people to shift in, right? Makes sense, right? At least temporarily, we hope that will shift the hash rate there. And then once we remove the incentive, they would stay there, right? But what happened was they shifted. And then when the incentive
they went back.
They went back, and I was like, oh well, okay, like that kind of sucks, right? And there's nothing wrong with this other pools. Some of those pools even charge lower transaction fees, like maybe by 0.1% or something like that, right?
What can be a proven way, or is it really kind of like an experiment in attracting miners and trying to figure out what the community of miners would want? Is there any kind of assuring way to prevent a 51% attack, encourage decentralization outside of community ethos? I know here in Ergo we have a strong ethos of we want to protect the chain, we want to be around the long-term resiliency and cooperation, but ultimately that is a form of like soft power. And if you were to implement any mechanism for hard power, then you're taking away the first principles approach that Ergo has of, it is permissionless and we want to minimize the amount of actors in the background. Is there any real way that you can think of with the experience that you have to incentivize miners, or any sort of good ideas that you have yet to implement on your own chain?
No, I mean, like, that's why we combine master nodes with proof of work to just kind of prevent 51% attacks, right? But then after you start doing that, then even Oxen is another project that used to be called Loki. They used to also be proof of work, and they were like, hang on, right? Yes, we have this checkpointing system and whatnot, but now that we have it, what is the role that miners play? Are they a big part of our community, right? Like, I don't know, maybe Ergo has a more healthy miner ecosystem. I know Monero, they have much more responsive miners, and these tend to be the large scale miners. Some of them hold botnets and stuff like that. And they, because for them, it's kind of makes sense, right? If you have a botnet, you also would probably be involved in ransomware, and therefore you want to kind of support Monero, right? You want Monero to exist, right? It fits into their modus operandi, right? I will support the stuff that gives me utility, and therefore I will do things to protect it, right? But I don't know if, like you say, this is like soft power and whatnot, because if you take a look at most pure proof of work chains, they are secured by economic motives, right? I don't think we can rely on altruism to altruism can only go so much, right? And therefore there's checkpointing. Of course, some people, do some sort of like merge mining, right? Or they kind of piggyback off the hash rate of another chain or something like that, like Dogecoin and Litecoin apparently, or some they use like Komodo's delegated proof of DPoW or something. I can't remember what the D stands for, but that also has its own set of issues, because then you're relying on their validators as well. So I mean, the easiest way that you can deal with it is just say like, oh yeah, I'm going to have a max reorg land of 6 blocks or something like that, and I'm only going to be considering tell the exchanges to not accept reorganizations, any sort of like basically don't accept deposits until you get like 6 confirmations or something like that, based on what your max reorg length is. It's kind of crude, and then makes you wonder that, well, is proof of work like really a great consensus mechanism? It's great in many ways, but yeah.
I suppose what Ergo wants to focus on is more on the utility of the dApps that are built using the native blockchain and obviously the native coin, right. To have a sort of an economic incentive that miners want to mine this thing and protect it, because so many dApps that are completely decentralized, or if they're open source, or even if they're partially open source, the ecosystem is providing value on what it actually does with its smart contracts. And it's a very ambitious thing, and it's definitely an experiment, right? Because other than Ethereum, I'm not sure if there is another smart contract capable proof of work mining cryptocurrency that's ASIC resistant, right? I can't think of any. So it definitely is an experiment, right? And we're on the horizon of Ethereum leaving that space, right? And there's going to be a vacuum. And where's that hash rate going to go? I feel like there has to be a centralization of some hash rate at the top, where it's going to be a single cryptocurrency that has to have max profitability, because that is what Ethereum pretty much provided as well. And that was based on, again, they had the first mover advantage, but also the utility of the ETH coin, right? Even though they ran the truck over the miners, we're going to burn ETH and we're going to decrease the profitability, and miners aren't going to get the full amount of rewards that they're entitled to, and that is pretty much unilaterally set from the top down. If you don't like it, then leave.
It's still the most profitable coin to mine in most cases, in most times, right? So people mine it, right? So I don't know, like I wonder, are we going to see more 51% attacks when all this either hash rate comes across, right? Because there will be either farms like, what am I going to mine? If someone wants to attack, I should put my GPU farm for rent to attack coins, right? I mean, I'm not wishing bad on anyone, but it kind of makes sense, right? Obviously, you know, a lot of this will be sold for rendering farms or stuff like that. But some of that could be like, yeah, I'm going to like make this one last buck, attack this project, and make a hell lot of money, right? Because we have seen so many coins get 51% attack, and it's not any fault of the developers, and maybe it's not the fault of the miners either, right? But it's just the nature of proof of work. And I guess, you know, I guess maybe Ergo has to ask themselves, or we have to ask ourselves, like, are these miners actually participating in our community, right? Because when we were holding our discussions, our forum, our forum meetings, or a direction of the project and stuff like that, the miners were, yes, they are like, you know, a handful, right? But by and large, the miners did not participate in this discussion, right? They were like, oh, yeah, you know, there were a couple of like really cool mining influencers that covered us, you know, like DJ Mines, even Voscoin also talked about us, Raid Panda and all this sort of stuff. But, you know, the biggest message I was telling them is that if you want the project to care for the miners, show that you care by shifting your hash rate off to miners, which was like 80% of the hash rate. We still haven't seen that, right? So if they couldn't be bothered to just change the pool that they're mining on, maybe it's a failure of the project that we didn't engage, the miners or whatnot. But we're like, the ask is not very big. Shift your hash rate to another pool that is still profitable. And that's all we're asking. And they didn't, you know, there were a few people. There were people like that came into our forums were like, oh, you're crapping on the miners and whatnot and stuff like that. You know, I wanted to support your coin, but now I can't. And I'm like, okay, so that means right now you are mining Ethereum. Yeah, because mining Ethereum is the most profitable. I was like, yeah. So you're kind of proving my point, right? It's you don't mine the coins that you support, you mine the coins that are most profitable, regardless of whether they support you or not. Right. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Ergo is very conscious of that. That is a very interesting point where the soft fork proposals or the EIP, they are entirely the miners that have the voting power in that, right? You delegate your hash rate, not to necessarily to a different pool, but there is I don't want to get it wrong, smart contract, a compatible mining pool such as GetBlock. So if you're mining with that smart contract pool, you will get attached to the block reward that you are proportionally receiving to your hash rate. You're going to get sort of monetarily useless voting chip. And then
that's a great idea.
Chip,
yeah. Tying the mining towards getting voting rights. I think that's a really cool idea to also engage mining community members. I think that's a really good idea. I mean, this is something that we kind of, you know, most other masternode coins just give the voting power to the masternodes or the stakers or whatnot. We didn't. We said like, look, you know, anyone can come as long as they prove they have some sort of connection with Firo, can come into the forums and have their voice be heard, right? I think Ergo's mechanism, this was something that I did think about. We haven't gone down that path, but the idea of on top of, you know, maybe having some small coin holdings, but there also has a proof of work component so that you have to put enough work to be able to earn the voting right. And I think that's a really cool idea. So if Ergo has done that, then I think it's a worthy experiment to give a shot at. But, you know, maybe this is the way to engage miners to be part of your ecosystem. But from our experience, you know, just like pure proof of work mining, I mean, even Beam and all this other stuff, we haven't really seen much like loyalty. But perhaps if you give them like very clear voting rights, but that to me is also a bit scary, right? Are miners the best people to make decisions for your project? That's a good question, right? Like, is your average GPU miner at home, you know, do they have the necessary knowledge, or like they can just like vote, what I found is that if you give a certain class of people power, they are going to vote to empower them. Like if I'm the miner, like yeah, like as you said, like maybe this no mining pool thing is great for decentralization, but it affects my profitability. So even though that I think it's better to be decentralized, I'm going to vote for something that increases my profitability. Or let's say like with masternodes, right? In many cases, if I'm a masternode holder, I'm going to vote for more rewards to be dedicated to masternodes, not miners, because I'm a masternode holder, right? So
Yeah. One of the
you're
trade-offs of decentralization is that you have to give a group of actors a unique power in order to implement changes. And if you're trying to, which Ergo's ideology at its core, we have a very small foundation that is going to be long-term a blimp. It is only there as a nonprofit in order to give sort of training wheels so Ergo can live on its own down the line, and just have a core group of developers and faces that are able to put forth the proposals that are smart, and then let the miners decide from there. But yeah, that is one of the things, right? If you don't have a hand to hold, will the kid know what is best for him when crossing the road, right? And yeah, it is a very interesting experiment. And I believe here the miners are treated like adults on purpose in order to not only think about profitability, but also say, hey, you guys are securing the network. And this is like the most important job in a proof of work setting. So therefore, you will be treated like adults in order to vote. And if you don't vote, then you are mining without having your voice being heard. And it is a interesting experiment. So far, so good. But again, we began with non-outsourceable puzzles, and that was implementation from the start that ultimately miners decided to get rid of, which basically you would have been forced to solo mine, and they ultimately opted for mining pool. So it is a tricky situation where there is a transactional element of profitability, but there also is from the beginning this grassroots first principles approach of we're making the most decentralized chain after Bitcoin, and with that comes an enormous amount of responsibility. And who's going to have that responsibility long term for sustainability? It has to be the miners, and that is night and day between maybe what some of the elements of Ethereum. So there is definitely that thing. If that actor is missing, how do we shift the ethos and all of those things without force, so miners look at something other than profitability when mining is a business at the end of the day?
Like those voting tokens, do the mining pools, are you relying on their honesty to like distribute those voting tokens to the, can they be like reaping the?
No, as I understand it, you receive the tokens, the voting tokens, directly to your payout wallet. Then you set up your rig with certain parameters and numbers that are included in the proposals, and you're delegating your hash rate there. And that goes for all of the mining pools, not the smart contract mining pool. Only the smart contract mining pool will give you those voting tokens. Otherwise, you are delegating your hash rate towards a certain, I don't know what the numbers are, but it is a number that you put into your rig to say, I am putting my hash rate towards yes or no. And then the majority consensus of that mining pool, then that will constitute if that mining pool is going yes or no. So it has to be a super majority of 90% of all mining pools. And how do people do that? By putting that tiny bit of information into their rigs, which means that they have to manually be aware of the ecosystem and do that in a timely fashion in order to vote and delegate their hash rate towards a yes or no. Then GetBlock is doing a smart contract mining pool where they give you the little tokens, which makes it a little easier for people to then put those monetarily useless tokens into a certain wallet that will be yes or no. Those are the type of experiments going on here. And so far it's worked out. And then what happens? Well, the developer comes in and they help to implement the software that miners voted on. And if the community at large wants to say, well, like you said, these are general purpose parts, they probably all have a gaming computer or can afford one, hopefully, and they can delegate their hash rate towards a yes or no on any mining pool of their choosing. What we are fearful of is, like any proof of work currency, cryptocurrency, is not having, again, the 51% of attack be a thing. We want to gradually take the largest mining pool, which is Nano Pool, and steadily decrease the proportion of their hash rate over the system. And for example, in GetBlock's case, they are kind of an up and comer because they have the smart contract mining pool, right? So they may not be the most profitable, but they are also the ones with the most bells and whistles and most tools. And that naturally would help attract miners over time towards that cause. And just knowing that you have other options other than just getting your payout from a particular mining pool. Now you're adding in other elements that would attract other sort of mechanisms to attract miners to different pools and things like that. So that seems more of like the best approach. And it kind of, it's like a hostage situation, right? You give the miners a gun. How do you know they won't shoot the ecosystem in the head? And these are the things being done in order to incentivize the long-term sustainability and making sure the miners understand the power that they have in their hands. That is so far the best that we are doing, but it never stops. Miners are always being empowered from the beginning in order to prevent attacks in the future, because as the miner rewards go down in our ecosystem, the scarcity as well means that we really need to incentivize just ecosystem growth. So the native token is actually relevant. The native coin is actually useful for something. It is not just being held, as you said, in order to get like a 20% yield or whatever. Then you sell it on KuCoin and then you move on to the next project. There has to be real utility behind it. And without having an Ethereum, consortium at the very top. So all of these tricky things and keeping a first principles approach that ultimately builds on Bitcoin's original vision is what Ergo is trying to do in this DeFi space that is completely, riddled the majority of make money quickly. And that actually ties into, two of my last questions. With the recent controversies in DeFi taking place with UST and Terra Luna, what are your thoughts about the current state of DeFi in general? Where are we at as a not only an industry but as a culture?
Well, I think it's unfair to characterize DeFi as like Luna, Terra. I mean, that's obviously one aspect of it, right? Obviously, there are a lot of Ponzi-nomics, right? Like, this stuff like, rebasing coins, there were all these DeFi yield farms. A lot of it were basically, well disguised or not well disguised, or maybe upfront, Ponzi games. Like it's kind of like catch the hot potato, right? I mean, that we have to admit that actually fueled DeFi because people were gambling and getting these yields, right? But obviously a lot of this stuff like, YAM and all this other stuff, not even talking about the exploits, but just like, the general model. I don't know if you remember like DeFi summer, everyone was offering like, crazy farming yields and without like realizing like, impermanent loss and all of that. But that was kind of what like kind of made DeFi so hot, right? Obviously, there are still, I would say legitimate use cases of DeFi. Like I think stuff like DAI is a pretty good use case. Like, they have like an over collateralized stablecoin, or, stuff like, Uniswap, or, this type of like, AMM type of DEXs. They have been, really good at improving liquidity, stuff like Curve, and lending platforms. These are really useful, I would say, like DeFi building blocks, right? Obviously, they're not as exciting as compared to, let's say, something that's going to give you like a crazy yield, or some sort of algorithmic stable coin and stuff like that. So I do feel that, yes, there's the good and the bad, and obviously some of the biggest and most profitable and the biggest blow-ups come from the Ponzi-nomic types of thing. But I do think that DeFi is here to stay. But I am also, as a privacy project, people have been talking about privacy DeFi. That kind of actually scares me a little, because we've seen like so many contract like flaws and vulnerabilities, right? Or developers getting rugged and like developers rugging projects and whatnot. At least in a transparent type of system, you're being hacked. You're getting screwed over. The developer is rugging you. In the privacy DeFi space, I don't know, are we going to have some sort of like layered approach, right? How private do we want our DeFi to be? Obviously, there's it's a spectrum, right? You can have different levels of privacy on DeFi. Yeah, I can hide who is interacting the contract and doing a swap. That's fine, right? But if I'm hiding like the contract like mechanism, or like the amount of money that's inside the thing, that gets a bit more risky. So I'm pretty bullish on DeFi. I just hope that the ecosystem matures and stays away from all this like too good to be true things. But I don't think we've seen the last of it yet, right? We seem to be seeing new types of Ponzi schemes, or money games, or like financial experiments that honestly they might call it innovation, but in the long run, it's hurting the space as a whole, because it attracts regulatory scrutiny and paints a really bad picture when people lose money on this type of things, which is not necessarily their fault. Like the whole Luna thing, I have some friends that lost all their savings, like several millions of dollars of US dollars just gone like that, because they thought it was a stable coin. I've seen some projects with treasuries, they thought they were in stable coins and getting a 20% yield, all of that wiped out and stuff like that. And even like, even Firo doesn't have anything to do with Luna or stuff like that. No exposure to UST, that just affected the entire market, right? And I think one of the scary things is that because now blockchain and DeFi and all these cross-chain things is making the system more interconnected. And when it's more interconnected, it's also becoming like a financial system, right? Where a collapse in one portion of one thing has knock-on effects on other things, right? Causes liquidations here, which then cascades to other stuff, and it has all these knock-on effects. So I don't know how to address it, right? Because obviously, there will be demand for this type of things. There will be, but I hope that eventually we'll learn the lesson that, hey, let's stop doing stupid shit like this, or trusting stuff that sounds too good to be true. And yeah, I mean, this is an unpopular opinion, but maybe there needs to be some regulation in the space. But as a privacy coin, I mean, that sounds really bad. But at the same time, people losing their savings over like false promises, expecting them to read white papers and things like that. I don't know. It's a really hard line to draw. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
finally, to
We haven't
wrap
talked
up,
about Firo's privacy mechanism.
I'm getting there. I want to wrap up with your own Lelantis.
Right.
So, what separates the technology of Lelantis from other privacy coins out there in the space? And what would you say makes for a superior privacy experience?
So what is interesting is that, Ergo actually uses something called zero join, which is kind of like a combination of zero coin and coin join, right? I think now it's like Ergo mix, and now there's going to be some improvement. So I actually got to know Alex from this thing, because we found a vulnerability in zero coin, and then we had this, we were just having informal discussions on how we might fix zero coin and stuff like that. Obviously, the problem that we had is not experienced in this new zero join protocol, but this is how I kind of like got to know about Ergo and Alex, which is pretty cool, right? And so what separates us from the rest, right? Now, I don't want to go too deeply into it, so I'm going to use this kind of very easy to understand analogy, which is kind of crude, but it's a great way to explain things. I think I've also presented this in the ErgoHack Summit, which was about privacy. Yeah. And the idea is how do you approach privacy, right? You could basically, mix your coins with others, right? Which is kind of similar to, I go into a lift, I drag a bunch of other people into the lift with me, I let out a fart, and then I'm like, oh yeah, whose fart is this, right? And this is kind of like Monero strategy, right? Or like with Grin strategy, let's all go in together, like Mimblewimble, let's all go in together, let's all fart at the same time, and now all our farts are commingling. I'm like, whose fart is whose, right? So these are ways to provide privacy. Obviously, Bitcoin is just like, I'm going into the lift, I'm the only one in the lift, I let out a fart, and yeah, that's me, right? Zero knowledge proofs work like a different method. So currently our privacy mechanism, how it works is that I let out a fart, I make it disappear, but I can choose any time in the future to make it reappear. And that's pretty cool, because it means my anonymity set, or my plausible deniability, is not just with people in the lift, right? Or people I drag into the lift or stuff like that. Is with anyone who ever entered the lift, right? Now, this is Lelantis, which is our current privacy protocol. This year, we're moving to something called Lelantis Spark, which is even better, because now I can pass that right to redeem the fart to someone else. So the person doesn't even need to go into the lift. I'll be like, hey, I have this ticket to redeem a fart in the lift. I'm passing it to you. No one knows, right? And there's this like transaction that goes through. And now it becomes like really, really good privacy, right? Like this is now not just with the people that were in the lift with you or that entered the lift. It could be someone else completely who never even got near the lift, and now suddenly has this right to make the fart appear, or pass that fart to someone else without even redeeming it, right? And so that's like, we think that's a better privacy mechanism than like mixing or like ring signatures or stuff like that, because it offers much greater privacy levels. But at the same time, on the cryptographic building block level, we don't have trusted setup. We don't have this like special hoogly boogly ceremony that we have to destroy stuff and hope everything goes well. I mean, that's a real problem. Obviously, Zcash has getting rid of it with Halo 2 and Orchard and all of that. But our protocols are also designed to be modular. So that means all the parts are modular. So let's say we find a new type of zero knowledge proof that is more efficient, or they can do better things. We can swap it out and put it in. And therefore, the privacy protocol is, still valid, and we can kind of upgrade it, right? And because it is modular, it's also a lot easier to do audits on it, because it's just like, I look at here, I look at this, and look at that, right? Rather than this whole thing that tries to do many, many things at once. So in terms of simplicity, it's a lot simpler than like ZK snarks or ZK circuits or Halo 2 or Orchard, which can be very, very hard to grow. You may understand it, but it's all these very, very small little things. And the problem with that is that while I really think that Orchard and Halo 2 is really, really good technology, it also means there's a lot of reliance on the Zcash or the ECC, the electric coin company, to know these things inside out. They have internally express how hard it is to find auditors and stuff like that are not part of the ECC, because the thing is so complex, right? That even the experts that come to look at it, they're like, do I really get this? Am I missing some nuance or subtlety and stuff like that? So I think ours is kind of like a bridge in between that. We're offering very high privacy, no trusted setup, no thing, and yet still being reasonably simple. Obviously, it's still a very complicated protocol, but when you compare it to, let's say, like a ZK circuit or stuff like that, it's a lot simpler. So that's kind of like our privacy protocol in a nutshell. And Lelantus Spark, Monero's actually has a different, uses many of the similar principles and some of the key ideas in Seraphis, which is their next-gen privacy protocol, comes from Lelantus Spark. So it's nice to see that our work is also inspiring other work in leading other privacy coins. So we're glad to push this space despite our so-called smaller market cap. Yeah.
Thank you for that. What are a few of the improvements you feel that could be made to cryptographic privacy not seen yet so far in the industry? Like what would be the future beyond Lelantus Spark, and what are other things that you would like to see as the space evolves and technology improves over time in general?
Well, right now we are lacking good quantum resistance schemes. I mean, obviously, to me, yes, the threat of quantum computing is always there. Obviously, I don't think it's that close, but we should start thinking about, well, how do we build this type of systems in a quantum resistant way, right? All these privacy mechanisms that we have today aren't really quantum resistant. Okay, some people say, oh, ZK Starks and whatnot, I don't know if all components, like ZK Starks itself as the proving system, yes, it's quantum resistant, but if you try to build a privacy protocol of it, you have to solve other stuff. Every single component has to be quantum resistant, right? So, and the kind of the issues right now is that quantum resistance, yes, there are quantum resistant protocols out there, but they're not efficient, right? So there's no point to say like, yes, I'm quantum resistant. I'm protected against this, quantum resistant threat, but I'm 200 times slower. It doesn't quite make sense to do it right now, right? So I hope people understand that, it's not that we're ignoring the threat. It's just that the technology hasn't caught up to make it efficient or competitive enough to go down that path, right? So hopefully we'll see better stuff. I also think that's kind of like so a lot of the privacy has been like over what we call generalized zero knowledge proof mechanisms, whereby is this general, like a ZK circuit that can prove all this type of different things. It's called a general, like zero knowledge proof things. And these things are quite complex, right? While the zero knowledge proofs that we use are what we call purpose-built, like specialized things, like proof. This zero knowledge proof only does membership. Like, am I one of the people that burn the coins or not? This is like a very like special generic, like not generic, like it only proves one thing, or like a range proof proves that there is the value is within a certain number. A balance proof proves that both sides of the input and outputs are balanced, right? We now everyone's been looking at like general purpose zero knowledge proofs. I wish people would go down and maybe like look at all this more purpose-built zero knowledge proofs and see if we can build more efficient versions. Hopefully we see more on that. So otherwise, I mean, transactional privacy is one thing, right? I'm starting to see the development of useful mixed nets. So, network layer privacy is also something that people tend to ignore. People like us, we use Dandelion++, some other people. I don't think anyone has used Mixnets yet. But it is going to be an important component, especially if you're talking about really high levels of privacy, where we can't ignore that privacy leaks don't just happen on the blockchain. Blockchain is, of course, this permanent ledger, but a monitoring adversary, someone that's monitoring the network or monitoring other things or taking other sources of metadata, those are also potential leaks of privacy. So I hope that other types of metadata leakage can be reduced. And I also hope that, there are much better cross-chain DEX infrastructure, especially for privacy coins, that can also do these swaps in a private manner. So I hope to see privacy research in those areas. I do think that, obviously this thing goes at a really breakneck pace, but we haven't seen that much developments in say like privacy DEXs or stuff like that. Yeah. Or network layer, like metadata, like beyond the on-chain stuff, yeah. And Lightning Network, people say that, there's going to be a lot of privacy there and whatnot, but most experts say actually Lightning might actually have worse privacy, but we'll see. I don't really know whether this is a design priority for Lightning at this point in time. Yeah.
I have two wild card questions here that kind of came up as we were talking. Firo.
Firo.
Also, Firo?
Yes.
Firo has a hard cap for the coin supply. How important do you think that is for a project to have? Because if you don't have a fixed supply, you're able to generate token after token or coin after coin after coin. It seems like it's very difficult to maintain value if you have infinitely expanding supply, right? It's always going to be inflationary unless the value that you provide users with that coin exceeds the inflationary supply. And then that seems like very difficult to do. So how hard is it, or how important is it for a cryptocurrency? I know use cases vary and that doesn't always work for certain projects, but how important is it to maintain sort of a storage of value and making sure something that you own as your own property is finite?
I think this is a really misunderstanding of simple narratives, right? People say, infinite supply and therefore this coin is shit. Actually, there's a difference. It's not like, obviously stuff like Luna, that's different, right? This thing just keeps on printing to meet any need to maintain the pack. Obviously, these type of systems are totally shit to for like a store of value, right? But you can have like tail emission, right? And tail emission is just like saying, right, I'm going to have a fixed emission of, I don't know, 1,000 coins a year or something like that. Yes, it is technically infinite, but it is not crazy. It's not like, does it actually dilute you? It doesn't, like it's a fixed rate that maybe people are, like agreeing to say that it's 21 million and agreeing there should be 1,000 coins every year, which means that inflation actually trends to zero anyway. Is there really a big difference? There really isn't, right? It just means that there's always going to be a base level of emission that can always sustain the miners even when distribution ends, right? And I think that's not necessarily wrong. There's like, yeah, if there's a 0.5% inflation per year, does it really make a difference, right? Like in the grand scheme of things, and because if let's say it's a fixed amount, that percentage keeps on dropping as time passes, right? People lose coins, and because let's say if I have 1,000 coins, right? Like let's say I have 100,000 coins. If I keep emitting 1,000 coins every year, but past 20 years, that 1,000 coins as a percentage of the total supply keeps on dropping. It actually trends to zero as well. It never actually reaches zero, but it trends to zero, right? So I think it's very different to say that, oh yeah, infinite supply, something like Dogecoin, I go like bam, bam, very high inflation and stuff like that, or stuff that can change inflation rate, depending on the conditions or what the core team says. That's a dangerous thing. But if you talk about, okay, let's as a community decide, like, yes, let's have a tail emission or some sort of end emission in the end that will always keep the miners. What tail emission does is that it provides a base level of reward for the miners, regardless of fee transaction volumes. And that's actually really important, because you want your security to have like that, right? Not fluctuate based on how much transactions there are, right? Because if Bitcoin may have less transactions, but it's still securing the value that is backing it, right? How can your security be varying based on transaction volume? It should be based on the amount of money that is backed, right? And emitting coins is kind of a way of tying the value of the project to the base level of security, right? And that's why I think a tail emission is an interesting idea that now Monero is entering. That will always provide some sort of base level of rewards that miners can earn, so that yes, they can earn more with fees and stuff like that, but there will always be this base amount that people are willing to mine, so that it makes it easier for miners to plan. It makes it harder to attack. It's harder to game. There is a game theoretic element there. I mean, there's even a Princeton study on how this, when you are just reliant on the fee market completely, and with that cap, with your block size cap, it's going to be kind of like a nightmare there. Yeah, so I feel that Monero has done a really interesting idea with dynamic blocks and a tail emission, where blocks can actually adjust in size based on what the nodes and the demand, right? I mean, I wouldn't explain it here too much, but I do think that we should get away from the infinite supply means it's total shit. No, a tail emission is totally fine. It's you have to look at the numbers and say, yeah, does this make sense or not, right? Because something can have a 0.1% inflation per year and still be infinite supply, but it's very different than other coins which have infinite supplies. Yeah.
Right. And in Ergo's case, which is interesting, I didn't think of it as a tail emission, but it pretty much is a tail emission. So the soft fork that miners approved was Ergo was initially going to, the total coin supply is capped at 97 million something and change, 97,700,000, whatever. It'll never change. But from 2019, from July 2019, when the mainnet was launched, all the way to, I think, 2027, all of the coins were going to be in circulation. The soft fork now that miners have passed is, so instead of ending in 2027, there is a reemission contract. So the block rewards will dwindle a bit quicker, and the extra block rewards that are now in that soft fork, that reemission contract, will be used as sort of a tail emission. So from 2027 and 2045, there will be a base of 3 ERG per block reward on top of all the transaction fees and things like that, in order to give the ecosystem enough time, we're talking about 2 decades, for it to be fully fledged out and then run out of the tokens, but be self-relied on. 20 years is a long time, but transaction volumes and unused storage rent. So if you lose your coins and you don't reanimate the UTXO boxes in a 4-year period, at least once, that will begin to decompose. There's a small tax that goes back towards the miners to re-earn again.
You mean if you don't move your coins, it starts degrading, decomposing?
After 4 years, yeah, that begins, but it's a very tiny tax. It's 0.14 ERG per year after that, and it goes back for miners to re-earn. So there is no, it incentivizes some sort of periodic activity in the wallets, but also it means that there is never any permanent loss, or there is a, you cannot lose your Bitcoin, as we infamously have seen notoriously people lose hard drives and things like that. So it is always there for people to earn, but essentially that acts as a tail emission as well. And I think, yeah, you're right. There are things that, right now we're living in a time where inflation is a dirty word, right? And nobody wants to see that. But at the same time, if you look at certain use cases in many multiple use cases across DeFi, inflation is not inherently a bad thing. It is a way for maybe coins need to be spread out more. For example, if you're trying to use it as a payment method solely, and you don't want gas fees or transaction fees like Nano,
or to grow your community,
or to grow your community. And I think it is people are jaded by the lack of responsibility that comes with increasing supply of anything now, right in this moment. But over time, responsible projects that do certain, they have an inflationary supply, but they do it responsibly, and there's a real use case behind you doing that. That ultimately is a healthier thing than just saying we're capped and we're shut down for business now. Sell the coins that you have if you want somebody else to get it. So liquidity could become a problem. And then also, what are you doing at that point? You have to question, well, it may be that you're looking for storage of value, or maybe you're just looking not long-term, you're looking at the short-term effect of constraining supply. And then you just want the value to go up in the short term, and then maybe you abandon the project long-term thereafter, because there's no incentive for you to do so once you've reached that peak saturation of users and things like that. So it is a double-edged sword, like everything we're talking about today, right? There is a certain line that has to be drawn where you balance very carefully and with a lot of responsibility the different aspects that different projects can take, since you don't have any parental guardian holding your hand over you. We're all relatively young, millennials and things like that. And in the future, there's going to be things and protocols that with more wisdom you would have done maybe when you were at your current age or when you first began a certain project. And that changes over time. But yeah, definitely the responsibility is a big one, because any sort of misstep will just tarnish the reputation of a project altogether. People have many other options, and we saw that with I don't know what happened there, but for example, in Terra's case, you lose your peg for the UST, you are gone, and you are gone tomorrow. And the big players lose money, but they'll survive. But the average person that does invest in something that was listed on Coinbase and was in the top 15 market caps, thinking it's completely safe, top 10 at one point, and it just completely goes capitulates. I actually think the industry has been kind of resilient in the face of that. When you have one of those major pillars collapse, one of those most prominent projects out there, and people still are able to hold Bitcoin at 30K, and your projects are still profitable to mine, relatively speaking. I mean, that I think that the interdependence on sharing the reputation of the industry as a whole, and the ripple effects are definitely going to become more interwoven. But as well, perhaps people are able to isolate cases like that. We look at the face behind the project and say, well, what were they doing that they irresponsibly caused this? And that may not be a fair representation of the rest of the industry, whereas maybe a few years ago it would have been opposite. It would have been like, no, you all are in cahoots with each other, and there's more understanding coming along the way as well.
Well, one of the things that I mean, like, this is slightly off topic, but I think it's also like in relation to like general governance and stuff like this, right? Because obviously these things are very nuanced and they require experience, or at least a lot of knowledge, right? And I mean, most people don't have time to kind of dive into this and to understand all of these things. And sure, and that's kind of my worry about like, total democratization where like everyone who has coins, who has a vote or stuff like that, right? And a lot of people, even in my community, there's a very strong, there's a not so strong, but there's been a group of people that have been really saying like, why don't you implement coin voting? Why don't you do this? Why, they really want coin voting. And to me, that's such a horrible idea. I mean, even Vitalik has spoke like against it and stuff like that, right? And I guess there's this wrong assumption to say that people that hold the most are going to act in the best interest of the coin. And that's we've seen. No. I mean, like people who have the most coin are going to try to rape as much value as they can in a short period of time. I mean, there are many like that, right? They're like saying, yeah, this may wreck the coin 10 years from now, but I'm going to get hilariously rich in 2 years. I'm going to make that decision, right?
I think controversially, I kind of look at a few individual actors in the Bitcoin community that they got in early and they're propped up at the top. And any moment that they have to promote some sort of news, even if it goes against maybe the first principles of Bitcoin in the first place, like, hey, a bank is going to have custody offer to wealthy clients.
Or let's support a dictator, right? Like naive guy is like, he's honestly a total con man, like.
You have, the thing about, for example, with that gentleman, putting all of these different gang members, suspected gang members in prison without trials or cases or anything like that. And especially in your part of the world, we see how that works with the Philippines, right? We see how bypassing all the checks and balances to get at an end goal, again, as we talked about before, once you use that power one time, you're able to repeat that channel over and over again for different purposes. He brought
armed soldiers into, to force people to sign a law into place. Like, what the heck, right? Like, yes,
and then the opposition, and then you start, trampling over opposition, and that is really authoritarianism 101. When I mean, the guy used to run a marketing company. He knows what he's doing. And I think it's a little weird for, again, controversially speaking, the Bitcoin community to just jump on whatever politician will be willing to help their bottom line, which is adoption of Bitcoin. And then you lose sort of this ethical principle and forget about Bitcoin, because I get it, censorship resistant, anybody can use it. But you as an individual, you are not censorship resistant in the same way that Bitcoin is. You are not completely neutral, and you have biases. And if you're influencing the wrong people, from a political standpoint, just because it helps your end goal of Bitcoin adoption, which means that your stash of Bitcoin will just go up in value, it's kind of hard not to look at that. Those individuals, not saying all the people in the Bitcoin community, but those individuals, it's hard to not look at them as multi-level marketers, and sort of how that goes.
It's quite painful. It's the same people that are calling other shit coins and whatnot. These are the same people that would bend over backwards to anything that would justify their backs. Like, I really love Monero. Like, Monero, may not have the best technology, but they have like amazing utility, right? It has a very strong community, has actual usage, right? But then you have some people who keep on saying like, oh yeah, Monero's used by criminals because it's good. That's criminals will use that is good, or like, we should encourage darknet usage and all this type of stuff. And I'm like, I get what you're saying, but this is not something that you should be championing because it hurts the entire space, right? Yeah, like, don't shield your bags in such a dumb way. Like, don't you shouldn't be championing crime or stuff like that, right? Like, yes, it's a tool of freedom and stuff like that, and obviously a tool can be used for good and bad, but to champion criminals, to champion, I mean, not just like in Bitcoin's case, like seriously, this guy was buying Bitcoin on his phone. That means he was using his country's money on his phone to buy Bitcoin. I'm like, that's like freaking ridiculous, right? Like, so
yeah. And when I mentioned that people are not censorship resistant, I literally mean they're not, in the sense that as human beings, when we have our own prejudices and bias that help us to understand our personal conception of the world, we do censor other people's opinions in order to arrive at our own concrete understanding of the world, so we don't go crazy, right? So it is just strange. It's such a strange thing. And here's another maybe controversial take. I don't agree with this notion that if you live in a third world country, or if your domestic fiat currency has been debased over the last several years, that now you must, if you are smart and sophisticated, you should buy Bitcoin and use that for your everyday expenses or monthly expenses. When it's so volatile, it is equally as volatile as the fiat currency that you're saying that they should not subscribe to anymore. So if you live in Turkey and you had the lira, now you bought Bitcoin a few months ago, Bitcoin's price has gone down by half. It is definitely volatile. And that is the same type of, what would you say, hypocrisy. For me, living in an industrialized nation, for me, it's a storage of value. I'm going to hold it as long as I can because you have the disposable income to do so.
Yes,
but
correct.
Somebody in a worse financial situation should play Russian roulette with the little money that they have by buying Bitcoin. They can't afford to hold it long term in many cases, but they should hold it anyways, because as long as people are buying Bitcoin, it's good for you, and it's not necessarily guaranteeing a storage of value in the short term for that person that has to pay for those expenses.
But I mean, let's be fair. Let's be fair. It's not just a Bitcoin thing. I mean, obviously, because Bitcoin has the widest adoption, is gotten like the most this type of things. But this is something that many other cryptocurrencies are also, claiming to help impoverish people or like get people out of poverty. And no, that this is. I mean, yes, that'd be a great goal, but you shouldn't be getting people who can't afford to lose money into it, right? I mean, yeah.
Well, to wrap this up on a positive note and not on that negative note, right?
I'm a lawyer. I'm naturally negative.
I was wondering if you had any ideas of how, quote unquote, more serious projects in the crypto space are open to cooperation. What ideas may you have for blockchains to be more interoperable, at least in not only in chains, but in sort of open communication development and just helping things become more resilient and stronger and more sophisticated and mature over time. So we don't live in our own little ecosystems and we don't live in our own little trenches. Well, here's Reuben. Reuben's coming from that trench over there to meet me. Yeah. I think, and that is a very dangerous thing. And sometimes in the Ergo community, like any community, even sports teams, we like to champion our own team a lot, and that also makes us more susceptible to blocking out other maybe criticisms or other pieces of information. And that is something I look out for in Ergo as well, that we don't go down that rabbit hole of thinking we are the best in the space and that there's no harm can be done here, because and then we fall into the same trappings as Bitcoin and we become evangelists of our own cryptocurrency. What can we do to be more interoperable across all boards for people doing the hard work, people developing and thinking of these ideas, such as in Firo and Ergo and other blockchain?
Firo.
Sorry.
I mean, well, first of all, when are you going to post this? Are you going to be posting this in 1 or 2 days?
I'm gonna do it today. I'll find time. I'll
Oh,
do it
okay, all
today.
right.
I'm trying to
Hmm.
have Saturdays be the upload day.
Mhm.
And do it on a weekly basis and things like that. So I want to keep that discipline. I don't want to change it for Monday because that'll throw everything off. So I'll find time
Cool.
and upload it today. You'll be up.
All right. No, because there's something. Okay, so anyway, like the BPSAA, which I think Ergo is part of, the Blockchain Privacy Security Alliance. Oh God, I can't remember the full name. But the BPSA, BP, they probably need a shorter name. But I think that's a good way forward, right? Where you have at least like some organization where you have open projects that are willing to kind of build products that support each other, right? Like, especially like, I mean, of course, cross-chain dexes, or like you may have you may have a cryptocurrency product like a checkout system, or all this sort of things that can be implemented across things. I feel like even like cross collaboration or cross research type of stuff would really, really help. But at the end of the day, the culture of working together and being collaborative really starts from the top. I mean, like, yes, we are decentralized, but let's face it, we all have core teams, we all have leaders in the project that we look up to, right? Yep. And the culture really starts from there, right? If you have a leader that's promoting tribalism, to say we're the best, everything is shit, and what everything else is shit and whatnot, you're going to breed that type of community. Well, if you have like a figurehead or a thing that's much more open and honest, okay, like someone like Vitalik, right, or like that, you get like all this, like this cross pollination of ideas. You attract like-minded people that are not just going to be. Of course, you have some F-maxis, but you will find that the Ethereum community is much more open to new ideas and adopting and trying new stuff, because the people leading it, the people are not maxis, or like they don't do that. So I don't know if there's like a overall solution on how it can be more interoperable and stuff like that. I mean, I think it's just is there's nothing technical stopping it. It's just a matter of culture and priorities, right? Like like even like the Firo team has collaborated with the Monero research team to develop our privacy protocol and develop theirs as well, right? And that's great, right? And others, they take our work and then they decide, not to work with us and say, oh, our modifications are so much better, etc., and then they get messed up because it really is just all a matter of culture, right? And this is something that's happening in Zcash that is quite worrying, that they developed this really, really cool tech, but they've started like saying that, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't be sharing this tech with other people, right? Maybe we should have a more restrictive license, maybe we should do this and that. I mean, that to me is really sets the tone, and it really has to come from the top level, or like whoever is leading or seen to lead or has a lot of influence in the thing, and they set the culture of the thing. So I don't think there's anything technical that's preventing projects from working more with each other or being more interoperable with each other. It's all about the culture, and that's how I see it. But obviously, hopefully, there'll be this amazing cross-chain DEX thing that isn't tied to a certain token or something like that. That'll be really cool. And that would be a game changer, but obviously that's only one way to work together, and there are many other ways to kind of cross pollinate. And I guess like even like shows like this, right? Like I'm not part of the Ergo community, of course I'm friendly to them, but I think opening your audience to other views, other opinions from other projects, yes, we may not agree on everything, but always treating people with respect and seeing, their opinions, at least you may not agree, but, don't have to be like, call them a shit coin or stuff like that. And I think that's important. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. Well, on that note, thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this show. And again, Reuben is on Twitter. What is your Twitter if people want to follow you or get in touch with you?
I think it's Reuben Yap, ReubenYap. Obviously, if you want to check out Firo, we're on Firo.org. All our socials are there. We are really active on Telegram and Discord. We also, if you want to participate, in like discussions, there's a lot of ongoing posts and discussion in our forums. And yeah, I am in the Ergo channel, I think. So, if you want to ask me or something, you can always tag me. But yeah, drop by. It costs nothing to join our community. Yeah.
And I'll put a few of the links in the description that are like most prominent and important, including your Twitter and
Sure.
the official organization page. Least I can do, right? For all your time
Thank
spent
you.
here. So thank you so much. And guys, I'll see you in the next one. Hope you enjoyed. See you. Bye.